Hello and welcome back to the PH Nutrition podcast. My name is Luke, one of the coaches with PH Nutrition, and today I am joined by Liam. Liam, how you doing, man? You well?
Oh, I'm very well, buddy. Very well. We're recording this Monday morning. It's been raining, sunshine's out now, so happy days. Feeling good.
Beautiful. And today, guys, we're going to start off a series of podcasts that we're going to get out every month of research reviews. So we're going to be diving into one study each month, dropping it in a midweek episode, just diving into kind of the minutiae of it, any kind of new exciting stuff in nutrition. So today's study that we're going to talk about is around fruit consumption. And it is a study that is called The Effect of a Fruit-Rich Diet on Liver Biomarkers, Insulin Resistance, and Lipid Profile in Patients with Non-Alcoholic Fatty Liver Disease, a randomized clinical trial. So a bit of a mouthful there, but we'll dive into what that means right now. So bit of a background on this study before we sort of dive into it. What this group did, so it was group based in Iran, and they basically took 80 people that had to be at least 18 years of age and have a BMI between 18.5 and 29.9. These people also had to have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. They excluded a load of people as well. So there were lots of exclusions to do with medical conditions. So things like diabetes, you weren't allowed to take part. Smokers weren't allowed if you were pregnant, if you were breastfeeding. And they also said that you couldn't take part if you were following a certain diet. And for those of you that are listening, because it's not a visual medium, I did air quotes there when I said certain diet, because they didn't necessarily specify certain diets. Of the kind of 80 people that they recruited, 32 males and 40 females actually finished the study. So 8 people dropped out, but luckily it was 4 people from each group. So what they did is they split the remaining people into groups. So there were 36 people in a low fruit group, that we'll call it, and 36 people in a high fruit group. These groups, the low fruit, were instructed to basically limit their intake of fruit to 2 or less servings per day. The high group were told to consume at least 4 servings per day. Interesting thing about this is they didn't actually specify what a serving means as well, but we'll come back to that when we start kind of diving into it. They then looked at a ton of things. Kind of the big ones that they looked into were changes in weight, changes in BMI, then changes in waist circumference, blood lipids, glycemic control, and some key kind of liver enzymes. And because it was done in people with fatty liver disease as well, they looked at liver size and tissue composition as well. And this study lasted for 6 months. So a long study with some big groups, a relatively kind of real world application in terms of the intervention there as well. So Liam, it seems pretty good so far, right?
Yeah, I think that's the key thing. This, on the face of it, this title thinks like it's got nothing to do with me, but actually this is basically diving into the study saying that if you eat more fruit, you're going to gain more weight. And we want to dive into why that is maybe the case, maybe not the case. But these studies, the reason why this popped up was because the results were pretty dramatic.
Yes,
weren't they?
They were.
So there was, after the 6 months, there was a considerable increase in weight, around 7 kilos for the group that had the higher servings. So over 4 servings, we were instructed to eat over 4 servings of fruit. They gained 7 kilos. However, the group that were instructed to consume less than 2 lost 6.5 kilos. So there was like a 13.5 kilo swing between both groups just from changing the recommendation of fruit intake. Nothing else was advised, was it? Wasn't that different training programs, different, other things? Everything else was was maintained.
Yeah, they were told to keep doing their normal kind of training at physical activity level. They took kind of baseline measures of that. They took kind of baseline measures of intake at the start as well. So how much fruit each group was eating before the study. And then obviously kind of they did a bunch of stuff in between. They did 24-hour dietary recalls 3 times a month. They did physical activity questionnaires each month as well, just to make sure that there wasn't necessarily any huge changes in physical activity, or if there were, they at least detailed it, and there was kind of like a course for this as well, right? And as Liam said, loads of outcomes, but the big one, the one that's kind of got everyone talking, is that one with regards to weight, where there's a huge difference between the groups there. Quite a shocking one, really, at first glance.
It is a shocking one, mate. Yeah, it is a shocking one. And this is where, for me, people that would say they're evidence-based and just look at abstracts can then be kind of popping this out on social media or to their clients, or, maybe the more carnivore, slanted individual might be using this study to say, don't eat fruit, it's going to be bad and cause all of these, issues with your liver and make you gain weight. But this is where hopefully these research studies and, some other people have been diving into this study to be like, look, maybe this isn't quite the case. And also maybe justifications as to why there might have been such a big increase. I think for me, that was the one key thing that I kind of noticed straight away was, talk to me before I dive into that, mate, about the randomization of the groups. That was a big thing that you highlighted straight away.
Yeah, so it's worth kind of pointing out. So the groups were supposedly randomized, so chosen at random whether they were getting the kind of high fruit group or the low fruit group for the intervention. But when you kind of look at the baseline measurements that they took beforehand, there's already kind of some real kind of clear differences between the groups already in terms of what they're taking in terms of their energy intake, in terms of their fruit intake already. The group that was assigned the high fruit group, even before they were told to eat more fruit, were already eating more fruit, and they were already eating on average as well more calories. They were kind of eating 1900 calories, whereas the average in the low fruit group at the start, and this is before any interventions, guys, I need to make that clear, they were only consuming around sort of 1600 calories there as well. So already slight differences there, but still significant differences for sure in terms of what they're taking in at the start. So there's kind of not necessarily, it definitely wasn't on purpose. Randomization, you're going to ideally get that nice spread, that nice balance of even intake of everything at the start, but it doesn't always happen. And that seems to have kind of not necessarily happened here as well with those big differences at baseline.
Yeah. Like we said, it's actually a decent sized amount of people, and when you look at the research, like I say, they were already eating more. Then there was a bigger change. The higher fruit group actually ate more calories in the intervention. Yeah, around, like I say, 130 more calories on average between the two groups. But within that, some of the people ate 600 calories more, and other people in the lower fruit group ate about 180. So there's quite a big difference between some of these individuals there. So there could be around a 750 calorie difference between people's intakes. And I think that is maybe one of the reasons why there's been an increase in terms of weight in the higher fruit group. They were naturally eating a little bit more at the start. They were increasing more than the lower fruit group. And I don't know about you, like I said, if I had to eat more than 4 servings a day, I'm maybe going to go towards dried fruit. I'm going to maybe go to more kind of fruit that maybe has less fiber, kind of less volume, because I've got to eat a little bit more. Maybe that's probably one of the reasons why there was a bigger increase.
Definitely.
If you actually look at the dried fruit servings of things, there was an increase in terms of the high fruit group, and actually a decrease in the low fruit group. Which again, like, I don't really, I'm not saying dry fruit's bad, but it's definitely more calorie dense.
Yeah.
And that leads on to, what is a serving, Luke?
Well, yeah, that's a big thing that we need to put up, is that they didn't necessarily specify kind of serving sizes there as well. It's interesting that
that's the one for me that gets
the group. That's a big kind of. They might have detailed it to the participants. The thing that we're not seeing is it's not there in the study. It's not detailed to us, the readers of the study. So we don't know if they have or not. If they have, you'd think, hey, you should probably tell us that you have, definitely. Fill us with a bit more confidence. Not to say they haven't. We don't know that. That's a big kind of thing to say. We don't know if they did tell the participants or not anyway, but we don't know what they called a serving. So that is a big old question mark. It's interesting as well that in the high fruit group you mentioned there, they were told to just consume more than 4 servings. On average, they ended up consuming 7 servings per day of fruit, which is a lot. Realistically, that is a lot.
It's a lot of fruit.
Which obviously has kind of a little bit of a factor there. But they, again, were just doing what they told. 7 is more than 4. So they were consuming more than 4 there, which is interesting. And it's interesting, like you said, about dried fruits as well, because when we're looking at any kind of study like this, we're always going to take into account the wider research. And there's a lot of research out there on fruit. And most of the research, including like some pretty in-depth systematic reviews that have looked at fruit and obesity and that kind of thing, most of them either say that there's no correlation between fruit consumption and weight gain, or there might be a slight inverse correlation where more fruit leads to less weight gain or reduction of weight through obviously consuming kind of a little bit more fiber. And you tend to, if you're conscious about eating a bit more fruit, you tend to just be a bit more mindful about what you're eating anyway. The only kind of potential differences in the wider research around that are when you start thinking about dried fruit and fruit juices, and they don't necessarily agree with the body of evidence that says more fruit is either a good thing or a no difference thing. There is a small amount of evidence that says, hey, dried fruit and fruit juices consumption may lead to overeating and may lead to kind of cause obesity as well. So it's a great point that you make in terms of they weren't told just non-dried fruit in its true non-dried form, which is a great point that definitely needs to be made.
But also with the low fruit group, they were told to instruct to eat less than 2, and they ate, what was it, 1.7 or 1.1
servings
1.7.
again in quotation marks.
Yeah,
because we don't necessarily know what the servings are.
Yeah, like, and that's something. This is one of the things that I really like. I think me and you both like about this study is that seeing things like this it's great because it's practical advice that nutritionists and people would be giving to clients. Do you know what I mean? It's eat more fruit. Oh, it's good for you. You know, like micronutrients. Like we say it to people, like increasing the consumption of these is beneficial for your health, obviously in the correct amounts. And that's where I think, what is the correct amounts? Do you know what I mean? There isn't a standard serving size. So we would put in a more personalized recommendations for people based on our calculations. But if you're just told randomly to eat fruit, there's quite a scale in terms of, you know, a handful of blueberries could be a serving as opposed to a handful or 2 handfuls or, you know, a bowl of raisins, which are going to be vastly different in terms of calories, in terms of, you know, sugars and carbohydrates and whatever. So again, I think that I like the practicality of some of the, you know, the more practical studies like this in real world scenarios that people actually give advice, I think is fantastic. I just trying to delve into why this happened is still a bit baffling.
Yeah,
you know, but the calorie load is there. Is definitely a reason why, but it's that detail. That's what we're missing, and it's hard to derive real concrete evidence from this without more detail to say, okay, here's the portions we were told that we gave people, or even a food list. Do you know what I mean? Like, could be these are the fruits that you're allowed to eat.
Yeah,
you know, whereas we don't know what fruits they were eating. So for me, that's where there's a lot more behind the abstract.
Definitely.
what this
and there's a lot more beyond this paper as well. That's what everyone
definitely
needs to take into consideration as well, in that there, like I've kind of touched on and will continue to touch on, there is a huge body of evidence out there to suggest that increasing your consumption of fruit is a good thing. Like is either a good thing or a non-factor really when we're thinking about weight loss. But in terms of just getting more nutrients in, it's a great thing to do. And as I say, there's a huge body of evidence out there. And whenever kind of fruit is talked about in this way, fructose is normally what's demonized. And so fructose, for those of you that don't know, is essentially the sugar that is in fruit. Different types of sugar, obviously, we know glucose is talked about a lot, but fructose is the sugar that's in fruit. And it gets demonized. Like a lot of people will say fructose will lead to excessive kind of weight gain. And I mean, it's true when you overconsume on anything, you're going to lead to weight gain, definitely.
Yeah.
But there have also been some studies out there where they have given people pure fructose, like 150 grams of fructose. There was this one study where they just said, hey, here, have 150 grams of fructose supplement per day for 8 weeks. And they wanted to see what happens. And it's worth pointing out that that was in a healthy population as well, whereas the study that we're talking about here was not necessarily, well, it wasn't a healthy population. They had non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So it's known that fructose in healthy individuals can be tolerated. That study that I mentioned there, where they gave them 150 grams per day for 8 weeks, they found, as they kind of tracked their intake, that the participants actually reduced their intake of sugars from elsewhere. Subconsciously, they weren't told to. Yeah. They just ended up kind of doing it. And they ended up not gaining weight, not seeing any kind of issues with regards to glycemic control or anything like that. And it was tolerated well within a healthy population there as well. And there's tons of other kind of studies that have suggested that active people, athletes, can tolerate higher doses of fructose as well, and higher doses of this because of their physical activity level, perhaps because of increased insulin sensitivity as well. They can tolerate it a lot better than, say, those that are non-healthy, like this population group. I think it's definitely worth considering.
Yeah, definitely. And activity levels as well, isn't it? Like, increased muscle mass, like, all of these factors take into consideration, like, say, the way that your body metabolizes carbohydrates, metabolizes fructose, because if you're unhealthy, you're probably less likely to be training across a week, less likely to be moving, because we know that these are definitely factors that contribute to good health. So if you're not doing that, having a ton of carbohydrates, whether that's fructose, glucose, is going to be an issue compared to, say, an athletic population. Definitely, I think for me, it's one of those ones where this study is great and also really dangerous. And looking at it again, if we dive into quickly the actual kind of markers that they were doing as well, triglycerides and cholesterol levels, and glucose and insulin sensitivity and stuff. Again, on the face of it, you can look at, well, all of the high fruit diet increased triglycerides, total cholesterol went up, insulin kind of went up, and insulin sensitivity markers of this went up as well. Whereas in the low fruit group, it all went down. But we know that, I think, cholesterol, there's a lot of nuance in terms of what raises and lowers this. Triglycerides very similarly. And actually, is it that they're losing weight that's helped this? And actually just being in a calorie deficit for what they were doing is helping to reduce their cholesterol levels. And
on the flip side, if they're gaining weight, is that what's had the impact there as well, from just overconsumption of energy?
Yeah, exactly. Overconsumption for energy for the level of activity that they're doing. So if you're doing that, you've got to go somewhere. So these markers are naturally going to increase. Is it causation? Is it correlation? Is it because of fruit, or is it just because of the general calorie intake? And without more detail in the study, this is really dangerous to take these results. For me, you can look at these and go, wow, I just need to eat less fruit. No, you don't. And then that makes all my cholesterol go down. I love these little kind of chats because it makes you really delve into it and think, look, guys, you can't just look at these studies, because there are going to be more of these studies that come out. And hopefully this is why we're doing this, is to highlight that you've got to really dive into the practicalities of it. And I don't think that this is a true reflection on these blood markers that fruit is causing this.
No.
I think it's, like you say, these markers are definitely due to a little bit of an imbalance in terms of calorie intake and physical activity and, stuff like that. So, and again, these can be reversed. So it's not something that these guys now got now. So, it's an interesting one.
And obviously you don't want to become kind of too reductionist with things as well, but I know there's also a fair amount of evidence to suggest that obviously, fruit and fructose is a carbohydrate, and a lot of people in nutrition, in social media nutrition anyway, will have you believe that carbohydrates are what has caused this increase in obesity. Increased consumption of carbs led to an increase in obesity, and there's actually a fair amount of research out there to suggest that that's not the case whatsoever. In fact, consumption of carbohydrates has decreased in recent years, and obesity still on the rise. Which again leads back to, hey, is it not just overconsumption of energy? And I think, again, like, as I say, these results are still shocking. The difference in consumption of energy that we sort of saw within this group as well doesn't necessarily explain the vast difference between them, how big the difference between these groups were, but it can suggest a little bit. Again, I just think that the fact that this paper goes so far against so many other bodies of literature, we can't take it as true. We can't. I mean, we can learn from it, definitely. We can test it. Again, that's the most important thing. If this kind of paper is replicated and we see those results, and it's replicated and we see those results again, and it's replicated with knowing what a serving is, and we see those results again, then sweet, I'm going to listen. But because it is so different to everything else we know within the literature, I think I'm inclined to throw it out.
I agree. And I do think you raise a really good point, is that hopefully this is a bit of an opening for other people to do some more concrete and more solid research using a very similar kind of setup. Like we said, these are bold claims. And if you're making these bold claims that this had happened, I think you've just got to have such rock solid evidence. Everything has got to be meticulously laid out to then prove this. And they had a lot of, good foundations, but they didn't actually, we don't know. So we're making assumptions. So to chuck this big kind of like, this is the results we found, hopefully this kind of makes people go, okay, wow, let's kind of explore this a little bit more. I always remember a HMB study. Do you remember this one that came out like about, 10 years ago now? And they basically gave HMB, which is like a metabolite of, is it metabolite protein or creatine? Anyway, it's a supplement that's been used to help kind of prevent muscle breakdown. It's amino acid, and
it was really popular about 10 years ago, wasn't it?
Because of this
study. And
then basically people gained like 4.5 kilos of muscle in like 9 weeks or something. I'll dig the study out, put it in the show notes, but it was just this single study and it wasn't replicated. And so but people still hung on to it and started kind of selling HMB off of this one study, and what we want people to understand is that no, fruit isn't going to make you gain 7 kilos and, all your blood markers go up. So don't just kind of, maybe if you've seen it elsewhere, I don't know if other, some of the people that you follow, low carb enthusiasts and carnivore enthusiasts might be kind of using this as a bit of a vehicle to be like, look, this is the reasons why you should be doing this. It's just to be like, look, take a step back and look at maybe, don't jump in on something that's so new and so bold. And hopefully then when more evidence comes out, we can make some more informed choices. And also for us as people, we can make some, refine our methods and the way that we deliver stuff. Like you said, I'll be really happy to see more stuff come out, and well inclined to change our methods if there's some really solid evidence. Yeah,
and that's the key. Solid evidence is needed, not one paper with questionable serving sizes, with questionable randomization. There was one point as well where it's like questionable BMI changes as well, almost, where the groups, obviously one group gained 7 kilos, the other group lost 6.5 kilos. But in terms of BMI, the first group that gained, their BMI went up by about 3 points. And the group that lost, it only came down by a little bit less. I think it was like two, which doesn't really make sense unless they were like vastly different in terms of height, right? If one group's added 7 kilos, one group's lost 7 kilos, then BMI should be kind of up and down 3 and 3, right? And it wasn't, it was 3 and a 2. So that's questionable sums there as well. Unless obviously the height was so different in both groups another issue with randomization, a less relevant issue, granted, but they haven't kind of told us what the height of the participants was there as well. So there's that one, which is another questionable part of this study. So that my takeaways from this would be it's one study with shocking results that may be too good to believe, and some questionable decisions made either in the write-up or in the study itself. So can ignore it and keep eating fruit.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully this doesn't spawn the next thing that everyone's going to be following now, and that's a no fruit diet. And what kind of everyone is doing with carnivore people. But I don't know about you, people that are doing carnivore now, I think they've kind of found out that, like, man, this doesn't really work long term, and they're adding fruit back in. And that's the kind of new thing that I'm hearing a lot of people do, is basically carnivore with fruit to get the carbs in. So,
they'd be better off adding vegetables in anyway, I think. But just again, from that's not necessarily saying that fruit and vegetables are wildly different. We should focus on vegetables more than fruit. But even when we think about other aspects of health, when we think about, yes, there is some sugar in fruit and concentrated fruit juice and dried fruits and stuff like that, make it easier to overconsume on energy. It's a lot harder to overconsume on energy with vegetables, definitely, especially those that are higher in water and fiber than the more starchy ones, for sure. But fruit is still so rich in tons of nutrients and fiber and water. So, yeah. Fruit, eat your fruit and your veg. There's your takeaway. Both of them.
There you go. It's good. I like it. Thanks, Luke. That was really insightful from my side of things. And looking forward to delving into some more over the next couple of months.
No. Thank you very much for joining me, Liam. It's been an absolute pleasure. Yeah. And as I say, this is going to be a regular thing. We're going to review a new research article each week. If you find one that you think, hey, Luke, Liam, guys at PH, would you mind taking a look at this? Let me know your thoughts, and you want it to get kind of reviewed on a podcast, then send it over. You can send it to us on Instagram or on our website. We've got a spot to kind of submit questions for the pod as well, so you can submit it on there, and we will definitely take a look at it, because we're always keen to answer your questions and to review research that is relevant to you as well. We're going to try and make this always relevant. So it's not always going to be about fruit, that's for sure. It might be about kind of nutrition for training. It might even be about just kind of training, if you want us to have a look at that. Although preferably we'd prefer nutrition stuff for sure. But yeah, send them over. We'll dive into it. Liam, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for spending your Monday morning with me, mate.
No worries. Thank you. And guys, thank you for tuning in. We will see you very soon.